Today on part 2 of how to make money with scrap, I show you how to safely and efficiently scrap sealed HVAC compressor motors. Today on Challenge to Build, you're not going to want to miss it, so stay tuned. Hello everyone, welcome to Challenge to Build. My name is Paul Michael and welcome back to the garage. In today's video, I will be working on scrapping sealed HVAC compressor motors. This is a video that I've been wanting to make for a very long time. So if you have been waiting for this video, I am sorry that it took so long to make, but I appreciate you hanging out and waiting for it. I believe I have some new updated content for you in regards to these. I have a couple older scrap videos that I have in my channel from long ago. And since then, I have changed my method in how I scrap these. Also, I feel like I can put together a better video now. So it's going to hopefully be a little bit more clearer and easier to watch with new updated information on how I scrap these units. So what you are looking at in front of you are 3 sealed HVAC compressors. They are generally found inside central air conditioning units. These 2 over here are scroll compressors. The only reason I have 2 of them up here is I just wanted to show you the size difference between them. They can vary in size, but they are both the same concept of how they work. This one over here is considered like a piston style pump. There's a little motor down there and 2 little pistons that run around to generate the force needed to use this one. All of which have big electric motors in them, which is what we're after today. We're after the copper that's inside of them. There are multiple ways to go about scrapping these units, and if you've spent any time on YouTube searching how to scrap HVAC compressors, you may have seen some of my older videos along with many others who scrap these. This video here is simply just going to be my method of how I've come up to do with this. There is certainly no right or wrong way when it comes to scrapping these, as long as you get after the metal that you are looking for in a safe manner and end up ultimately making a couple bucks off the scrap, then in my opinion, it's a win. So I'm going to show you more or less focus on the scroll type of compressors. These are a little bit more difficult than the piston style, but at the end of this video, I will also show you how I scrap the piston style. So I'm gonna grab my tools, grab my safety gear, and get involved and show you how I go about cutting these out. So just before I begin and show you the process on how I do this, quick little safety rundown. Face shield, safety glasses, gloves. I really have enjoyed wearing my apron now. My apron is my new favorite clothing item when it comes to the garage. And then also in part 1 of the scrap series, a comment was made about hearing protection, and I forgot to mention it, although I was wearing it. My go-to item is foam earplugs to be able to put inside your ears to kind of soften some of the noise, because it does get kind of loud when you do this, because we're going to be using some angle grinders, some hammers, and some drills. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the process. And we are going to get ready to scrap. So simple as that, 5/16 hole in the bottom, that's step 1. In order to drain the oil out, I have a Tupperware container with a crate inside of it that I'm going to go place this in. And then I have already drilled a couple holes in 2 others, so I'm going to grab one, bring it over to the table, and then show you what the next step is. All right, so now this is where things have changed for me quite a bit. Usually, when you work on these sealed units, you would have to make 3 cuts. One at the top, one at the bottom, and then one across the case in order for it to split open. With me changing my system, I now only make 1 cut. Now, with making 1 cut, you do lose some of the heavy iron that is up in the top of this unit, but for the cost of what it takes to make the 3 cuts, I am willing to lose that just to be able to make 1 cut and speed up my process. Even with losing that 1 piece of, I believe it's cast up there, it's actually the scroll part of the compressor up there. With losing that, I don't lose that much because the weight stays there, and then I still get light iron price for the case. So the trick here is to make 1 cut up and along in like an angle. You're going to start low on one side, and then halfway around you're going to be up higher, and then connect the dots. You're essentially cutting the case at, say, like a 30-degree angle. I'm going to show you how I do it right now. And keep in mind, when you're moving these around, these units probably weigh about 70 to 80 pounds as a sealed unit. So when you're moving them around, just be very careful. They are heavy. You certainly don't want to drop it on your foot or just drop it in general and end up breaking something. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this. Like I said, now I make 1 cut, and this is how I do it. Now with doing this process, you will find that there will be some residual oil inside the case. So just be prepared for a little bit of a mess. Now, all that you have to do is take your big hammer, hammer it apart. Of course, this is going to be a bugger. Normally the armature comes out. Never had one get stuck in there. Figures. lay it down. This is where you can get some of your aggression out too. Take the armature out that way. And there you have it. This is what we're after. The nice thing about doing it this way is it allows you to go after the copper and you still get light iron and heavy iron out of the process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a towel, clean this up real quick, grab my scale, and then I'm going to show you the weight breakdown as we go through this process. I'm going to weigh up what the light iron is and the heavy iron, or actually maybe I'll do that after once we cut this out. Now what I'll do is I'll go to step number 3 and I'll show you how I go about cutting out the copper. So one thing I forgot to mention, with cutting it apart, I know that that segment was probably a little bit long. Normally I compress down my segments of when I'm actually working, but the reason I did not compress that down was so that you could use it as a timed event. I only did change my angles around, but I can promise you, you did not lose any length of time on what it actually took me to cut this apart. So if you're trying to sit there and figure out if it's worth your time and effort to do this, I left that whole segment in there so you could go back and see how long it took me. So now what I'm going to do is, this is again where I've changed my method for how I specifically do them. This is not a how-to video, right? This is how I do it and the process in which that I take to scrap these. So my next process is I take the electric motor over to my bandsaw and let the bandsaw do the work while I focus on either cutting apart another compressor, drilling more holes, letting oil drain, or clearly just, as you can see behind me, I've been working on my old pickup truck. So it allows me to kind of multitask, which in the long run makes it worthwhile for me to do this because I can accomplish other things while I'm working or having something else work. So I should make note too, is if you don't have a bandsaw, I know some of you may not have that option as a method to cut these off. You can go back into my older videos and see that I've used the cutoff wheel to simply just cut off the windings right off at the base. In some videos, you will see some people make only one cut and then take an air chisel and use an air chisel to chisel out or even manually hammer out the windings. I do not do it that way. I like to simply just take a second and cut both sides and then hammer the windings out afterwards, which I'll show you. I do just want to make mention that I do realize that I'm using a bandsaw, which is a little out of the norm for what may have been seen in how to scrap these. But like I said, it just allows me to use my time more wisely and do other things. So I'm going to go run and put this over there and let the saw do the work and then get back and show you how I finish out this process. So the last step of the process in stripping the copper out of the electric motor, and this is again where people have different processes in order to do this. Like I said, I like to cut both sides of the windings off, and then how I choose to do it is I have a 6-inch diameter piece of pipe. It used to be longer, but I've cut it down substantially because I've used this on my pickup truck build over there. But it still works. But what I like to do is I like to just grab my stool, take my electric motor, place it on the pipe. I have an old screwdriver that works pretty well, a pair of vice grips for a handle, and then it's just a matter of sitting in here and simply hammering out the windings. They generally fall out pretty quick and easy. This is also something that my kids actually like to help with. They are the winding kids. They sit here and go through all of my motors and do this part of the process, which again allows me to do other things and allows me to spend time with my kids, and they enjoy it. They actually make a couple dollars doing it also, so they get something out of the process as well. Unfortunately, they are not here to help with the process today because they are in school, but it only takes a couple of seconds and they generally pop out really easily. Sometimes you find some stubborn ones, and if that's the case, it's up to you on how you get them out, if you get them out. I mean, overall, it's a pretty simple process, and when you have multiples of these and you make a day of it, it is generally not, you know, a bad way to make a couple of bucks, kind of stress-free. Spend some time in the garage or just in the shop or wherever you're at, doing whatever you're doing. And it's a good way to also help save the planet, recycle a little bit. Like I said, not a lot of people get involved in stripping these out. But, you know, depending on the price of copper and metals, also depends on whether or not it's worth your while to do that. So once you get that done, now you're left with the plating. And actually, if you're careful enough, what I do is I keep these just as a unit. These are just hundreds of little tiny plates glued together. If you keep them like this, I have my steel shop buy these as heavy iron. If they drop or split, then they become light iron. So choose wisely on that. So I'm gonna go put this on the table. What you're left with here are the windings. Sometimes they come out with little plastic strips. Sometimes they do not. Again, my kids sometimes will split them. They kind of peel off pretty easily. I don't get involved too much with cleaning them because my scrap yard buys all of this as number 2. That's another thing that my comment section was filled with on the last video, is why the scrap yard buys this as number 2 rather than bare bright. That's something that you're going to have to work with your scrap yard with to determine what you're going to get paid for this copper. I'm not going to argue the fact of why I think it should be bare bright, but it's something to do with the copper that is used to make them because they can see the difference in coloring. So like I said, I don't argue with them. I'm happy with number 2 because if they buy it as number 2 and it has the plastic on it, they don't give me a hard time about that. Also, the windings that you cut off are banded and have some plastic in them as well. So it's a matter of just a little bit of give and take with the buyer when it comes to the scrap price. Also the time in which it takes you to process it. So I'm going to put all this stuff on the table and I'm going to give you a final breakdown on a weigh-in and wrap up this video. So now that I have everything cut apart and broken down, I'm going to take a minute and give you some final weight values on the materials that I have here today. I'm specifically going to talk about the weights and not the dollar per pound prices, because that is going to vary from time to time and from place to place. So starting with, we'll leave the copper last. I'm going to make you wait till the last minute for the copper because that's what you want to see, right? Starting with heavy iron, right? So the armature is heavy iron. There is a chunk of aluminum that if you feel so inclined, take a chisel and hammer off, which you can put aside for another metal, but I'm going to leave it on there. And the heavy metal, actually we're going to do it like this. So the heavy iron, or number 1 steel, is I believe what they call it. comes in at 26 pounds and 10 ounces. We'll call it 26 pounds. So we have 26 pounds of heavy. Next, we are going to weigh up the light iron. And if you look in the light iron, this is what I was talking about earlier. There's a chunk of cast in here, and then there's also a piece of heavy iron up here. This has got some serious weight behind it still. But this is where cutting it one time, you lose out on that, opposed to cutting it 3 times to get to that metal. I choose not to do that anymore. I'll just take the weight for light iron. So light iron, balance it out. We have 30 pounds, and I think that says 11 ounces. Nope, 30 pounds, 1 ounce. So we have 30 pounds of light iron. And then finally, zero out the scale again. Finally, now we have the number 2 copper. Put my bin on, zero it out. And now number 2 copper, specifically out of a scroll compressor. Oops. Four pounds, 9 ounces. Not too bad, I don't think. So with that, that pretty much wraps up this video specifically for the scroll compressor. What I am going to do is I'm going to show you the process for the piston style compressor once we wrap this up completely at the very end. So if you want to stay tuned for that, please feel free to continue watching. The process, if I wasn't filming the video, the process in which it takes me to scrap one compressor, I would say is about 20 minutes. I think I've gotten it down to about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes per compressor. So taking the weight values that I've just given you, timesing it by the pound price that you have, you can come up with a pretty good value on what it takes to do this on time, the time that it takes to do it. So with that, my name is Paul Michael. This has been Challenge to Build. Remember, safety first when you scrap these units. I appreciate you watching. Hopefully this video helps you. Now it's time for you to get out and go challenge your build. In this case, scrap them up. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So if you're continuing to watch, we're going to call this some bonus footage for you. The process in which I take to scrap these compressors is very similar to the scroll compressors. The only major difference is the cut that I take comes around the case this way. I split the unit and then follow some of the same steps and procedures as far as cutting the windings off as I did with the scroll. But what I want to do is I'm going to cut this right now and split this, and I'm going to let the camera run and show you how long it takes me to cut all the way around this. Again, using this as a timed event so you can make a good judgment call on whether or not it's worth it for you to cut these apart and scrap these. So let me get my grinder, my face shield, and some earplugs in, and I'll go ahead and start cutting this out. Now once you get this case cut open, there's a copper tube that runs down in and around for the oil. You're gonna have to cut that, and then this is mounted on springs, so all you should have to do is lift up, and then there's the wires right here for the windings. I'm gonna go grab my cutters, we'll cut them, and then lift this out. There we go. These bad boys are generally a little heavier. And then what you have to do is the bottom is filled with oil. So what you want to do is just dump it in your reservoir that you have for the other ones draining. Careful not to spill it like I am. So when you scrap these units, be prepared to make a mess. I try my best not to do that, but it's inevitable sometimes. So the next step on these is pop the cap off. Now these units are a little bit different in the fact that you need external torque sockets. There are 4 external bolts that hold the housing together. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to grab them and buzz these out. So in order to take these apart, we're going to need an external number 8. I'm just simply using it on a 1/4-inch bit adapter with my impact driver, and it pops them off very easily. Then it's a matter of cutting more wires. There's a zip tie. That comes apart. It all goes in there. And now there is the electric motor that we're after. And then this all becomes number 1 steel, heavy iron. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go put this in my bandsaw. I'm going to cut off the bands or cut off the windings and then hammer them out like you saw me do previously in the other one. And then once I get it all cleaned up and prepped, I'll bring everything back over to the table and I'll give you a weigh-in on the piston style pump as a comparison, scroll versus piston. All right, so after following some of the same procedures that I did on the scroll compressor, I got my earplug so I can hear. We're gonna start off with the heavy iron again. So this part of the motor, so the motor weighs 23 pounds. 23 pounds plus 21 pounds. So 44 pounds of heavy iron. Now for the light iron. We have 16 pounds worth of light iron. Throw this on. 0. And for the number 2 copper, out of the piston style pump, this one actually yielded a little bit more. This has 5 pounds, 5 ounces. The scroll compressor had just a little over 4 pounds. This is 5 pounds, and I did notice that the gauge of wire in that motor was a little bit heavier. So that wraps up the bonus footage for the piston style pump. Again, I feel as though it's worth the time and effort to go through this process to grab the copper out of them. They range anywhere between 4 to 5. I have seen a 6-pound motor, depending on the size of the units. varies on the size of the motor, so they can get pretty big. So I would say an average, we'll just say 5 pounds out of each motor, about 15 to 20 minutes to break it apart. I gave you guys the weight breakdowns for the light iron, heavy iron, and the copper, and the amount of time that it takes to do it. So I feel like this has probably been a pretty valuable video. If you've liked all of this content, please leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you're up to with scrapping and how you go about breaking them down. If this video has helped you, please, let's break through the algorithm. Give this video a like, so this way here we can spread the word to all of the scrappers out there who do this. Also, share the video, please. With that, my name is Michael. Again, Challenge to Build. Thanks for watching. Now go get out and scrap.